Welcome to APPA's 10th Town Hall on COVID-19. My name is Billy Zadig, APPA Standards and Codes Administrator. Allow me to review a couple housekeeping items before we start. All attendees are in listen-only mode. We ask that you utilize the chat box for the Q&A segment of this session. While we attempt to respond to all questions submitted, should we run out of time, responses will be posted to APPA's COVID-19 RAQ Recently Asked Questions webpage. We also remind participants to ensure their speaker volume levels are set to your personal comfort. Our speakers are gathering us from across the continent, and as such, varying volumes will be present. Today's session will be awarded professional continuing education credits as well as AIA HSW CLUs. For AIA certificates, please email me at Billie, B-I-L-L-I-E, @appa.org, along with your AIA membership number. Our recording will be posted to the APPA website later this afternoon. Additionally, you will receive a follow-up email within 72 hours providing a designated link to all webinar recordings, presentation slides, as well as information on upcoming webinars and town halls. At this time, it's my pleasure to introduce Lander Medlin, APPA's Executive Vice President, your moderator for today. Lander, take it away.
Thank you, Billy, and welcome all attendees. We appreciate your engagement in these town hall meetings as we further explore the impact of COVID-19 on our facilities organizations and the education enterprise. I'd like to thank both our regular participants for continuing to join us. I see many of your names regularly, and any new folks who decided to do so today. Our prior town halls have been recorded along with answers to all your questions and posted to the APPA COVID-19 website resource center. It is constantly being updated, so please return regularly. And our town hall meetings do occur every Friday at this time with a different target and focus. Hint, next week's is called Got Questions? Ask the Community. And that one will be followed the following week on de-densifying space. Again, thanks for joining the dialogue. We really want your questions. That's what makes this a rich conversation and the special community we share. So post them at any time. Over the past 2 to 3 weeks, institutions have started to weigh in on a fall reopening. We must prepare our facilities accordingly. That's why we chose this topic today, the next in our series on the road to reopening your institution. Impact of COVID-19 in the trenches, cleaning protocols, and HVAC MEP systems requirements. The 3 panelists today will address cleaning protocols and building systems operations requirements now, and as we address fall reopening, along with the need to broadly communicate these plans to educate the entire community. As I've said, the road to reopening takes many planning paths. So here's the format for today's town hall. I'll provide an introduction to set the context, a reminder of our latest survey to upload your plans and documents to share with your colleagues, set the stage for our discussion on cleaning protocols and building systems operations requirements, going to introduce our stellar panel who will provide some opening framing remarks. And new today, a few polling questions added throughout. And then we'll get right to the Q&A, as I know you've got many questions to ask this exceptional panel. I'll conclude with the survey reminder, call for images, available resources, save the date, and closing remarks. I've opened each town hall with a compare and contrast of the coronavirus statistics. Since we last connected only 2 weeks ago, America is now mourning the loss of over 100,000 people to COVID-19, a towering death toll. Put in perspective, 100,000 people is perhaps 10 times the total number of people most of us will cross paths with in our entire lives. Put another way, 1 in 7 people know someone who has died with it. In one word, horrific. Every state is slowly creeping out of crippling lockdowns and attempting to manage their daily outbreaks. Many are done with this. Unfortunately, this virus is not done with us. Clearly, institutions' reopening plans have taken into account the critical need for aggressive testing, contact tracing, treatment, and an efficacious vaccine. Yet social distancing still remains our most effective tool for deterrence. Adding face coverings helps. We cannot become complacent. Take responsibility. Use your head. Stop the spread. The impact on the economy continues to deepen. Another 2.1 million jobless claims were filed this past week, bringing the 3-month tally, 3 months, to more than 40 million people, the equivalent of more than 1 in 4 workers. In fact, 40% of those lost jobs are predicted to become permanent losses. Staggering. The hunger crisis continues to worsen. Children are at risk of contracting MIS-C, which is multi-symptom inflammatory syndrome. Now, we are also coming to grips with a hidden child abuse crisis. Gut-wrenchingly sad. Higher education is not immune. We are indeed facing a reckoning. The coronavirus is taking a steep toll on our industry, our students, and our respective faculty and staff, our very way of life. With so many unknowns, what do we know? The latest report from NAFSA, Association of International Educators, estimates losses of more than $4.5 billion for the higher education industry. The number of colleges and universities at risk of closure is now hinted at 500. The Chronicle of Higher Education now cites 67% of higher education institutions moving to reopen this fall. Others are planning to stay fully online, with Cal State University System's 23 campuses and Harvard Medical among the most notable. We know 2/3 of students surveyed want a face-to-face offering. College and university presidents continue a warranted concern about the issue of fall enrollment. And why wouldn't they? With fewer high school students applying for financial aid to date. With the CDC's warning of a second wave during flu season this fall, many higher education institutions are taking the warning seriously and choosing to close their fall semester as of Thanksgiving break. Although institutions are getting pretty creative, it's still like driving through a dense fog. You just have to keep moving. Further to the point, Michael Crow, president of Arizona State University, recently recounted an experience he had with his father when something terrible would happen. And his father would say, "Do I have your attention now?" Hence our panel today, speaking about cleaning protocols and building systems operations requirements. Frankly, these operations requirements fall squarely in our management space. We must get them right to ensure our community can go about their business safely and securely. Their perception is real and must be managed well. As we continue to see, the road to reopening takes many planning paths. Let's first start with Taft Walden, Deputy Assistant Director, North Carolina State University. Taft is currently NC State's COVID-19 representative for the Facilities Department. Taft has managed and developed such tasks as education and training for staff, cleaning and safety protocols, PPE, mock cleaning with staff, and EH&S for contaminated classrooms and offices, creating proper messaging and coordinating and communicating with EH&S and other campus partners. His responsibilities cut across academics, athletics, contracted services, the animal hospital, and veterinary school. Taft is also serving on the Facilities Division's Return to Campus Task Force. He has 13 years of experience in the custodial industry and was formerly Assistant Director at Duke University in both the academic and hospital facilities environments. Taft is retired Air Force after 21 years of service. He has an MBA and a BS in accounting. Taft will discuss preparation of buildings for occupancy and reoccupancy, the changes in cleaning, tasks and frequencies, and revamping of their focus and direction come fall reopening, especially with respect to all public high-touch areas. the approach if and when an infectious exposure occurs, handling necessary shift changes, why the requirement for face coverings, challenges with respect to PPE and equipment availability, and the criticality of communication to ensure education of protocols. Taft?
Yes. Hi, Ladner. Well, good afternoon to everyone. So as Ladner said, I have been involved on several committees and prepared a lot of protocols, and our leadership is now preparing, have been preparing our campus populations for the return to campus, and it has been a dicey situation to say the least, but we are making steady progress, and we hope that we will meet the challenge of the fall semester opening on schedule. Along the lines of the things that Lander mentioned, we have discussed a lot of things to prepare for the reopening of the classrooms, on campus learning, the return of the students to campus, and a lot of things have been discussed. Things have not been ironed out totally, as I'm sure that many of you are experiencing. But from the housekeeping perspective, we've met a lot of challenges. As far as getting and procuring PPE for our housekeepers to make sure they're safe when they're working in the buildings and wherever they happen to be assigned, in light of a returning population that may or may not be social distancing or may not feel that they have to wear, we call them face coverings. And so we have to prepare and prepare for the worst. So we have done our best, along with everyone else, to purchase as much of the face coverings, and we've gotten creative from our sources, our NC State facilities organization, our department, College of Textiles has provided masks for our community, and we have been in partnership with several vendors that have worked with us to get face masks. Our business services department has worked with everyone to try to procure face masks, as well as our EMC department as well. Housekeeping has worked very closely with EHS, Environmental Health and Safety, to vet a lot of our choices on chemicals or cleaning disinfectants and protocols for pressing forward in the best way to proceed with and adjust our cleaning protocols. So some of the changes that we have made include, the wearing of the face shields and face masks when appropriate while inside a building, in case someone else who comes into the building or into your workspace does not have on a mask. But we still practice, as the Ladner says, social distancing at every opportunity that we have. But we've also had to figure out, when on the outside of the facilities is appropriate to wear the mask. But the same verbiage still applies whenever social distancing or within 6 feet cannot be maintained, which it can be a challenge. But everybody's talking about face masks. But then the other issue that I've had a lot of customers come to me asking about sanitizer or sanitizing stations, portable, mountable, any kind we can get, sanitizer itself. And I've been able to get some of those items for several of our customers, but as everyone knows, they're very far and few between. We've also tried to figure out the best way to anticipate the educational needs of the fall semester from a housekeeping standpoint, in case our leadership goes one way or the other. And that has been a challenge in that we anticipated the possibility of maybe having time in between classes to disinfect surfaces, but we don't know if that's even practical. And so we're kind of going down the road of doing a detailed cleaning in the morning before the people come, and trying to forward locate disinfecting supplies, masks at the building entrances for people to sanitize their hands before putting on masks and then wearing masks in the buildings, and to practice social distancing. And from from the CDC, it works best that all parties have on masks. so that the spread of the germ can be mitigated as best possible, and we can still practice social distancing as much as possible. But that has been challenging, not just in procuring a face mask, but getting everyone to wear them. But then moving on from that challenge, we have tried to figure out, and I have a lot of customers asking for our advice about, what are we doing to prepare for our classes to resume on campus. And I had a customer this morning. We went through a long and in-depth conversation about that, and so we try to be as helpful. Communication is the key. I learned from every one of my customers who ask a question I may not have thought about, and then I do the research and try to get them the answer as fast as possible. So what we've done here at NC State, as I'm sure other campuses have done, is we've ramped up our cleaning and disinfection of high-touch surfaces in the common areas, things like elevator control panels, all kinds of railings in the stairwells and along the corridors and inside the elevators themselves. We've ramped up our high-touch surface disinfection in restrooms, and we've included additional rounds of that disinfection throughout the day. We're trying to implement a plan for additional staffing if it can be obtained, to do extra rounds of disinfection of high-touch surfaces in break rooms, conference rooms, any kind of common area, lounges, reception desk, the entrances. And I think in combination with the forward locating of our masks and sanitizer or disinfectant, wipes, or the few stations that we're able to get in place in throughout the building will help our staff and our faculty to be safe or be able to wash their hands, or when they can't wash their hands, to sanitize them. So we're doing all kinds of measures to make sure that we provide the safest environment. But we've also learned through experience that we have to represent what we preach, practice what we preach. If we facilities individuals don't wear the mask, we don't follow the protocols, when our campus population returns or the students' parents come to campus in the fall, they need to see us, providing the safest environment that's possible for the students to return, to put them at ease that we've got your child in good hands. So we're avid about, our leadership has been avid about the wearing of the mask and all the protocols. We have also talked about, leadership has addressed, and they're currently trying to figure out the best way to manage whether or not to stagger classes, and on our cleaning side or the facility side, whether or not to extend shifts, to include going to weekend shifts, to spread out and socially distance. So we're looking at all kinds of avenues. From a housekeeping standpoint, we tried to purchase electrostatic sprayers in case we were able to get into the classrooms and disinfect in between classes, should that be an option. But as everyone probably knows, the electrostatic sprayers are mostly made in China. Unfortunately, there is one brand, Clorox brand 360, that's very popular, that's made in Georgia, that we are trying to procure, but I think the latest is October is the soonest. And we're looking at other options as well. We've procured a lot of disinfectant that has a 30-second kill claim that is environmentally safe and user safe. And we've got some that have a 1 to 2 minute kill claim. So we're finding it where we can get it. Let's see. I think through the whole thing, the biggest factor that will determine our success is the communication piece. And I think our leadership has done an excellent job of that, keeping us informed and keeping those that are socially distanced or teleworking from home in the loop of what's going on campus, and preparing them to return to campus when the time comes. So I'm grateful to them for that. And so I'm just trying to help out and do my piece the best I can. I think that's about it for me. for me for
Okay,
right now.
that's excellent, Taft. I really appreciate it. And we have a lot of questions coming in that we will get to once we go through our other two panelists. But I do, before moving on to Joel, I want to introduce two quick polling questions.
Okay.
The first polling question, number one, is has your institution already established cleaning protocols or guidelines? And we're looking for a simple yes or no.
Yes, we have several.
Okay, so let's see what our colleagues have to say on this poll. Has your institution already established cleaning protocols or guidelines? Please select, and we're going to leave it open for just a little bit so that folks, participants on the call can chime in. I feel like I need to sing dun 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 dun. Please make sure that you get your institution's response in before we go to close the poll. And Billy in the background is able to see how many people have come in. And she's now closed the poll. And Billy, I believe that it says, let me hold here for 1 second, that we have 82%. Wow, that's fantastic, that have established them. And so many of you are probably getting additional tips and tricks for how you're working through these things. So please, we'll explore that more when we get to Q&A. Let's open up a second poll question. And this one is specific to, has your institution established face coverings as a mandatory requirement for all facilities staff? So number two is, has your institution established face coverings as a mandatory requirement for all facilities staff? Remember, this is not about the institution. This is about you and facilities. As Taft just talked about, the importance of having that protocol in place. So we'll keep this polling question open just a little longer. I think it will be fascinating to see. Here we go. All right. Wow, that actually is surprising, given many folks probably 2 or 3 weeks ago had not said that they'd made a decision. So requiring face coverings as mandatory for facility staff is really a great move, and you're really moving forward. Use your heads, stop the spread. It's important to keep our frontline staff safe and all facilities staff representing the direction that you're going. All right, Taft, I really appreciated your comments. A few of them I wanted to highlight before we move to Joel, and that is that you identified that communication really is key, that you're really focused on cleaning rounds to those public, adding cleaning rounds to public and high touch spaces, and leaving the offices, it looks like, to do theirs, and you're going to provide hand sanitizers and wipes and that kind of thing. And I love the fact that you said facility staff must model the way. If we don't model the way and wear face coverings and follow all the protocols, then why would we expect anyone else to do what we're asking? There's going to be an issue with staggered classes as they try to figure out how they're going to deliver reduced capacity given social physical distancing and the need to possibly extend shifts, of course, in the face of less resources. I know folks are asking questions about electrostatic sprayers, and it's getting very, very difficult. So we'll get to some of those in a bit. So let's go on to Joel. Joel Primo is the Chief Mechanical Engineer at J.L. Richards, an integrated engineering, architectural, and planning consulting firm. He brings 33 years of experience of engineering in the commercial, institutional, and industrial markets. He was among the first engineers to embrace sustainable design and high-performance buildings. When he's not leading teams of designers, he often teaches engineers, contractors, and owners a course that he co-developed for ASHRAE and has delivered this 3-day workshop as a complement to our APPA collection of programs through our continuous learning series. So at this juncture, however, let's look at 2 more polling questions before we go into the focus that Joel will bring to us. So the third polling question that we have for all of you, so get ready, is have you increased maintenance efforts on the HVAC plumbing systems for reopening? So this question is open now. Have you increased maintenance efforts on the HVAC plumbing systems for reopening? It's a simple yes or no. And we'll give you a chance to look at that and decide from your institution's perspective your best guess on whether you've done that. Billy will bring us back when she sees the right number. Here we go. So we're going to come in and see. Okay, this is interesting, and Joel's going to address the importance of this and some of the specifics associated with it. So Joel, we have 64% that said yes and 36% that have said no. So he's going to give you some insight on that. The fourth polling question, we want to get to that one. The fourth polling question we're going to move to is, are you making HVAC plumbing systems improvements to specifically address COVID-19? And this is, again, a simple yes or no. Again, the question is, are you making HVAC plumbing systems improvements to specifically address COVID-19? So be a yes or no. And this is going to be interesting as you look at short and long-term implications and funding and all kinds of stuff. So Joel's going to help us with some of this and the way that we can come at it. So I think Billy will have a good idea whether we can close the poll. And here we go. All right, this is going to be fascinating. 40% are making improvements, but 60% are not. So let's now move. Joel will focus on the importance of building systems prioritization, organized around 3 categories: equipment maintenance, overall operations, and needed renovations or upgrades. Which activities need to be increased or require greater focus and attention given implications from this pandemic? Recommendations concerning operations scheduled actions, the importance of truly assessing your renovations upgrade needs both for now and the long haul, all requiring some behavioral changes as well. Joel?
Yes. Hello, everybody. Thank you so much. This is a great opportunity to talk to so many fine folks in the college and universities. So the first thing I want to say today is really that the daunting task of assessing the conditions of your HVAC systems and plumbing systems as you consider reopening should not be taken lightly, obviously. I think it's very important that facilities managers prioritize all their work and be realistic about what they can and cannot do. I appreciate that some of you may be operating and maintaining facilities that are fairly new. Some could be very, very old, and you may have to recognize that, hey, listen, some of those are in such bad condition. They're such crappy buildings. If you pardon my French, well, I happen to be French. Then you may not even want to move people in a post COVID world of reopening your facilities. So I think it's important that you accept that you will have to take a very harsh and blunt look at your buildings and not get emotional. I'll revisit that topic in a second. So basically, as Lander mentioned, I want to look at how we can look at 3 separate categories of activities. One is equipment maintenance, 2 is operations and maintenance, and then operations rather, and then finally renovations and upgrades. So actually bringing design changes to your facilities. So let's talk about equipment maintenance. So before we talk about equipment maintenance and how we can improve how we maintain the facilities, before we reopen, it's important that we run our systems. So you may definitely want to come in a few days or a few weeks early and make sure you run your systems properly, just run them through the paces, because a lot of your systems have been dormant for a long, long time. So your regular fall startup would have to be implemented again, and not just on the ventilation and air conditioning side, but also on your plumbing side. So it's important that you should go around and test all your sinks, run the water, so that water that's been stagnant for a long time. Sorry, the phone is ringing in my office. I apologize. So if systems have been running for been standing still for a long time, that they would have to be run to make sure that all the stagnant water gets cleared up. So that's an important feature to remember when you reopen the building. Make sure you run your systems before you let students back in and staff back in. Now, under normal circumstances, it's always important to keep your HVAC and plumbing equipment running properly and well maintained. But in a pandemic scenario, it's even more important that you really cannot let your equipment fail. So regardless of how well your systems can operate, they really have to operate at their best, even if their best isn't that great. So every effort should be made now to make sure that all your fans, your pumps, your chillers, your boilers, your motors, your filters, all your equipment is in working condition and has been inspected to run properly. So bringing your staff early on maintenance, and I noticed that I think 64% of you already increased your maintenance activities, which is great. I think it's very encouraging, and I think that's the right behavior, that's the right reflex to have as an organization to make sure that all the systems are well maintained. One thing we cannot forget either is our building automation system. So we have to make sure that our control systems are also well operating or working well, and that they are well calibrated. So that means potentially going to verifying all your temperature sensors, measuring some pressure sensors. All these things need to be tweaked, because at the end of the day, that's all part of the system as well. And that's something that we typically don't always do at the beginning of a year, but we would have to consider in this case. Let's move on to operations now. So the maintenance should be fairly obvious to most, that we need to make sure that our systems are well maintained and operational. So we move to operations. We may have to tweak some schedules and set points to react to the reality of the pandemic. We want to minimize the risk of spreading viruses. And so, for example, it may be recommended for your facilities to operate your fans continuously to flush out your buildings. Now, that's not a common occurrence. That's something we typically do, but in the context of a pandemic, we may want to be ultra careful and ultra conservative and err on the side of caution in this case, and really make sure that we're continuously introducing a maximum of outside air inside our occupied space. And then we also need to consider that if we, as Taps was mentioning, we're going to be cleaning the surfaces a lot more. All those chemical cleaning agents we'll be using can be egregious to some of the occupants. So introducing more outside air would actually help both the air quality and also bringing down the concentration of chemical odors in the building. We also want to increase the outside air levels, so basically go to the air handlers and then reset the outside air damper positions so that we introduce more outside air into the space. Of course, then we have the debate of outside air quantity and indoor quality and comfort, because now if we introduce a whole bunch of high temperature, high humidity air in the space, will our coils be able to handle that extra load? Well, those are considerations to be made. So on very, very hot, very humid days, you may not be able to increase your outside air levels, but on cooler, drier days where you could, then it's recommended that you should. So that'd be something that you'd have to tweak on real time, which is not something we typically do. You don't typically continuously readjust in real time the position of your damper. That may be something you want to do in this case, just to help the overall quality of the air in your buildings. Speaking of relative humidity, I think relative humidity set points in occupied spaces would probably want to be increased, especially during heating season. So I'm talking mostly to the folks who have facilities in the north, where keeping a high level of a comfortable level of relative humidity in the buildings is a struggle. So ASHRAE recommends that 40% minimum relative humidity in occupied space be maintained. Now, this is a recommendation of ASHRAE Standard 55, which is the comfort standard, which is just a recommendation, so it's not necessarily the law. But in this case, we know that based on some of the research that's been done, that transmission of the virus is greater in dry air, the infectivity is higher in dry air, and the ability of a human being to fight infection is impaired when the air is drier. So that comes from us, from the research that's been done at Harvard Medical School by Dr. Stephanie Taylor. So where in the past it may have been a nice thing to have 40% relative humidity, in this case this might become a necessity to curb the virus's spread. Finally, we're talking about renovations and upgrades. So 60% of you have said you have not done upgrades or renovations to your system planning ahead of the COVID. 40% have said yes. So this is obviously a more involved procedure. The other ones are, increasing maintenance or tweaking operations is one thing. But now we're looking at spending capital dollars to improve our facilities to better address the COVID challenge. Now, many of you have older systems that may not have been renovated for years because they've been grandfathered into the old standards that that were in effect when the facilities were renovated or built. So you've never been forced in a lot of cases to change these systems, but now you may want to, even though you're not required by law to do so. So you may have to, you may want to reassess the compliance of your facilities to standards like standard 62.1 of ASHRAE, which is the indoor air quality standard. So you may want to reconsider all these things and say, even though the law says I don't have to do anything because it's an older system, I don't have to change it, you might want to take another look at it, maybe hire an engineer, maybe get some of your staff to evaluate how well your systems perform and compare them to the most current or the currently used version of the standard in your area as the law. Any renovations or upgrades to a building component is going to be much more expensive and more time consuming than tweaking the maintenance and operations procedures. So, and these things will affect your building for many years to come. So everything has to be very, very carefully analyzed and definitely not rushed into. You may also be the prey of overly eager salespeople. I'm being nicer when I say that. And you may be offered to install silver bullet solutions in your facilities. Now, some of them may be very, very good, but be very, very careful, obviously, to not buy into a technology that is not well tested. So things like high efficiency filtration systems using very unusual technology, something you should look into very carefully. And then, if you're not sure, consult your local engineers. Some of the changes that you may want to look into, though, that are fairly well established and make a lot of sense and recommended by ASHRAE, maybe improve your filtration to at least a MERV 13 or MERV 14. That's a filtration rating. You may want to look at better diffusers in your space. You want to improve the ventilation effectiveness in your space. In other words, it's not just a question of making sure that you have enough outside air in the duct, but also make sure that that outside air makes it to the faces and noses of your occupants. So anything you can do to improve the overall ventilation effectiveness through better diffusers, or perhaps if you're in the northern climate, it might make sense even to drop your ceiling returns and then bring them down with an extension to the floor so that the air will be supplied to the ceiling and then drop to the floor and get picked up at the return that's so closer to the floor. That would be a better scenario than say delivering warm air in a diffuser near the ceiling, and then a lot of that warm air will essentially bounce on the denser colder air that's below and then make it to the return without ever having made it to the faces and noses of the occupants. So these are the kinds of things that typically we don't consider, but these are things that we don't leave any stones unturned in this case. So in considering all these three categories of potential efforts, I think the first thing the facilities manager should be doing, if they haven't already started, is to address and assess rather the condition and the suitability of their spaces to deliver safe working environments. Now, like I said before, we cannot let our emotions influence our decision-making process here. If there's a really, really cool space that a certain professor likes to teach in, but you know as a facilities manager that it is inappropriate in terms of air quality, then maybe it's time to close that area down and say, listen, we're going to use a newer part of the campus, and then this old, cool part of the building that's got questionable air quality, we can't afford to risk people putting in that, especially if somebody after the fact can say, well, why did you choose to teach in that class when you had this other space that was available where it's more modern? So these kinds of decisions will have to be taken seriously. So I'm hoping that most of you will not fall prey to wishful optimism as a solution, because it's not. So as I said before, it's much better to err on the side of caution and then condemn the space until the systems are improved or until there's a vaccine, and then we can go back to our more normal lives. Also, we should consider that when we want to evaluate each of our spaces from the worst to the best, and then obviously load up the spaces that do better in terms of air quality. So this might be a sort of different way of looking at scheduling classroom usage. I know that typically we try to minimize travel, which is in this case is a valid point. But now you may want to look at, let's just agree that these rooms are really poor, they have bad ventilation, so let's not use them. So let's condemn them, and then let's focus on other areas. So this will take a lot of coordination with school administrators and the registrars and everybody else. So this is not an easy thing to do. So in conclusion, what I want to say today, and we'll address other questions as they come afterwards, is that it is important to understand that your HVAC and plumbing systems alone will not solve any of the real issues related to the current pandemic. But if they don't operate properly, they certainly can make a situation much, much worse. So your HVAC systems are part of a holistic approach, and then my two other partners will be talking about other things we can do. But your HVAC, don't expect that because you have a state-of-the-art, best practice, best design HVAC system that you can go in there and then stack people close to each other without masks and without PPE and without cleaning agents. So all these things all have to work together, and then the best HVAC system is still going to be insufficient as a fight against COVID. So I want to reiterate that you have to prioritize your efforts because you have a limited time between now and the time the schools reopen, so limited time and limited budgets to do this. And finally, continue to be brutally honest and critical in your assessments of the occupied space ability to provide safe and healthy environments for your students and your staff. Later.
Excellent, Joel. Thank you so much. I really appreciate the upfront nature of realistic prioritization of our systems. I did take note of the virus. I had heard much of this about the virus as greater chance of transmission in dry air versus humid spaces. So it's going to sort of change the playing field in terms of how we manage humidity levels. There are no silver bullet solutions, and so making sure that we focus on well-tested systems and some really good ideas on filtration and ventilation and the better diffusers and ways of dropping ceiling returns. So I certainly appreciated those comments as well. So now we're going to move to Alan Boyette. Senior Director for Energy Systems, North Carolina State University. Alan has worked with the Facilities Division at NC State for over 20 years, where he is responsible for campus infrastructure, utilities, central thermal and electrical generating plants, building system maintenance and operations, sustainability, energy management, and central engineering. His previous experience at State includes the role of Director, Building Maintenance and Operations, and managing renovation projects as Assistant Director of Facility Operations. Prior to joining NC State, Alan worked as a consulting engineer and with the Corps of Engineers Responsibility Project Design and Construction Management. Alan holds a BS in Mechanical Engineering, MS in Civil and Construction Engineering, and also a master's degree in Strategic Studies. Alan serves as an instructor in the Building Operations curriculum within APPA's Institute for Facilities Management and is a guest instructor on facilities topics for the Colleges of Engineering and Design at NC State. He is a professional engineer and has obtained APPA's credential, the CEFP, Certified Educational Facilities Professional. Alan is also a citizen soldier, having served in the North Carolina National Guard as an Army officer for over 32 years. Alan will bring us full circle, what is needed for dormant buildings and the protocols for reopening, whilst addressing the ongoing operational safety and health needs. Elevators, their operation with respect to social physical distancing requirements, address building prioritization requirements as well, potential for reduced occupancy and possibly closed for use entirely. Tough decisions since no one is backing off from their enrollment capacity numbers. And his reflection on NC State's approaches to these issues, along with those that have yet to be solved. Alan?
Hey, thank you, Lander. I appreciate that introduction and also appreciate your leadership in the higher education facilities business. Honored to participate today. I've attended several of these and find them very informative. Also spoken to many of you, my APPA peers out there over the last couple months, and borrowed some of the information from your website as well as APPA's website, just a wealth of information out there. So none of us have the answers, but as past president of APPA, Jack Colby, and Associate Vice Chancellor Bill Bagnell at East Carolina, I've heard them say many times, hopefully there's a few nuggets that you'll pull out of these webinars and town halls that can help you do your job better. So again, to use Lander's term of emerging practices, maybe not, no one has developed the best practices yet. I'll offer a few things to pitch in of what we're doing here at the NC State and kind of let you know where we are. So two things are happening right now in our world. One is we're in the process of a limited reopening to support mainly research activities. We're following the lead of our governor, who's starting to reopen the state of North Carolina, and we've been in the progress for that for the last couple of weeks, and that'll continue on for June and July. And then we're also in the midst of the planning effort to open up our fall semester. Our plan right now is to have students back on campus the first part of August, with classes starting on August the 10th on campus. So just real quick to lead into this reopening to support research right now where we're at, just set the stage just a tad bit. Our students left back in early March for spring break and never came back to campus as the governor issued the stay-at-home order. And we pretty quickly realized that this was going to be a long-term event, and it was going to have a financial impact on the university. So we had very limited operations, a few students on campus, some research. Our animal hospital at our College of Veterinary Medicine continued to operate. But really things got very, very slow on campus. And we took our stewardship role pretty seriously and figured out how we could help. And from a facility standpoint, we aggressively went after the energy reduction very quickly and attacked it pretty strong in a short period of time, as we're trying to reduce the number of staff we had from facilities on campus back in March as well. So we went pretty hard after lab buildings, you know, our big energy hogs, turning everything off, lab support systems, compressed air, vacuum systems, processed chill water, you know, processed steam, single zone air handlers we turned off, you know, window AC units, turning them off. We did a lot of different things, unplugging refrigerators, ice makers, vending machines, trying to do our best to save the university money. So that that's kind of where we were at mid-March, and then we transitioned to where we are today and in the past couple of weeks, and we're in our initial reopening phase. And right now for NC State, it is focused on our research activities, no summer classes or camps, and most staff are still teleworking, some minimum staff here on campus. So what I would offer as we begin this reopening process, over the last month or so, everybody's been learning more about this virus, and the industry recommendations have been out there. There's a lot of things going on. A lot of us getting calls from different vendors and equipment suppliers with ideas and solutions. And then we received a lot of feedback from campus. A lot of our academic side were reading those same things and getting contacted and providing emails and input to us in the facilities about what we should be able to do. And pretty quickly we realized that we couldn't talk to every vendor and we couldn't respond to every good idea, so we needed to come up with what our plan was and be able to communicate that. So put a cross-functional team together with maintenance experts, engineers, facility experts, along with our environmental health and safety, and put together a checklist in order to support this research reopening that we'll continue to do through the summer after our buildings have been dormant for several months. So putting that checklist together include things like what you've heard a little bit about, the cleaning processes that TAF provided, safety checks, building functional checks, testing our water quality, those kinds of things. And if you'll remember, we turned all of our lab support systems off. So turning those things back on and making sure that they function, as well as the fume hoods and exhaust systems, and preparing to support the research activities there. And as Joel mentioned, we are doing additional preventive maintenance to support this, and our real focus area is on the outside air systems and the ventilation systems to support the buildings as people get into those. A lot of good ideas out there. Joel mentioned the filtering issue. What we decided very quickly was that we could not convert all of our air handlers to MERV 14 filters. It's a great idea, but as soon as you do that, number one, they're not set up to handle it. So now you're changing filter racks, and then you're reducing the airflow because the pressure drop goes up. So now you cut down on what the goal of getting more ventilation air in. So what we very quickly decided we were going to do was to make sure things worked the way they were supposed to, i.e. filters were put in correctly, the seals were correct, the blanks were in place so you're not bypassing around the filters. So our real focus was to get the systems functioning back the way they were designed. So that was really the effort there that we went through. And then Joel made a good point about the ventilation air is very key. As buildings are occupied, we're disabling demand control ventilation. That's a great energy savings tool, but we're erring on the side of over ventilating buildings and not trying to save energy this summer as things come back in. Now, what we decided not to do was some of the ideas about, not recirculating air in your facilities. There was a lot of journal articles out there on that saying to do that. And what we realized, especially here in the South with the humidity and the temperature levels, we could not turn our office classroom buildings into hospital isolation rooms. If you do manage a hospital and you know what that takes from an air handling standpoint and a chill water standpoint, you can't do that with an office building without major costs and major upgrades and those things. So we decided that that's not what we're doing, but we are going to get the system back designed or to operate the way it was designed, because we just couldn't convert things to 100% outside air facilities. And so we found that communicating specifically what we were doing was a way to let campus know and not try to be reactive on all the good ideas. And one of those I'll offer to you is we have a College of Engineering that actually teaches environmental engineering and water quality. So our professors provided a lot of input on what you should do to water systems from the journal and articles. So we were able to go back with our checklist and tell them what we were doing in buildings, and then reminding them that the university and the state owned a private water distribution system, so we had to take care of that as well. So we turned them from giving us good ideas to us communicating what we were doing, and then they became our advocates to help communicate that to campus. So again, just trying to let folks know what we were doing and making a conscious decision of where we were and what we were doing for each facility. Another communication tool was with the checklist. We came up with a summary chart. So as we reopen buildings for research and we go through the checks from a facility standpoint, just a simple, here's the things we're checking, and a simple red, green, yellow communication method. Green means it's good to go. Yellow, it's okay, but there's a couple of things we still got to work on. Red, there's a big problem we need to deal with. Examples with that would be some exhaust fans not working, so we don't have a safe environment for a lab exhaust system. So that's the method that we're using to communicate the research activities, and we'll continue on as we open up all of our classroom buildings and our office buildings this summer. We'll continue to do that. So the second piece that we talked about early on, and you've heard some about, and what Lander mentioned, is the reopening in the fall. And we're heavily involved in that. The university has created 10 task force. The draft reports are out, and I know a lot of you are doing the same kind of thing. So I appreciate everything on your websites. We've looked at a lot of things other people are doing to gather some of those emerging practices to help us develop our plan. So I won't go into all the 10 task forces. It's pretty similar to what the others are doing. But what I would share with you is, again, I like Lander's optimism and the glass is half full. So I would tell you, under the leadership of Doug Morton, our Associate Vice Chancellor, facilities has been more engaged with campus, and now this crisis, the facilities key leaders are even more engaged with what's happening. We're even viewed as a better partner for campus and more integrated into everything that's going on. Doug leads one of the facilities and grounds task force for the whole campus. Our university architect is on the academic space side. I'm on the research task force. So we're adding our value to what campus is doing and showing how important the facilities team is to meeting the needs of campus. So I'll hit just a couple of highlights of our approach for how we're going to reopen things. We kind of view things that there's individual responsibilities and then there's university responsibilities. And I'll just use a simple example. An individual responsibility is to wash your hands more frequently, and then the university's responsibility is to make sure that the resources are there in order to do that safely in the current environment. So that's kind of the way we're approaching communicating things. From an occupancy changing standpoint, just looking, I'm sure everyone is struggling with the classes and how you're going to do your schedules as things are changing. We're seeing that classes are going to run longer into the evening. Probably we'll have Saturday classes. So that certainly brings challenges of how does facilities do its business. Is there cleaning between classes? Are you expecting professors and the academic staff to do some cleaning between classes? How are we going to reprioritize efforts on high touch areas and then some of the maintenance and routine tasks? How are we going to get into things? Another thing we're looking at is some tents or tentage around some of the key student gathering areas, dining, student centers, libraries, those types of things to help with social distancing. Just trying to figure out what's the best way to approach that. And then from classroom planning, our space planners are working with the provost office and the academic departments to talk about the new classroom capacities. And I'm sure everyone's struggling with that. If you have say an example, 75-person classroom, how many people can it actually hold now that you have a 6-foot social distancing rule that you're trying to apply? And then you couple that with, what I think a lot of us have learned, that our students are in a very low risk category from this virus, and it's more of the faculty and staff that are on the high risk side of this. So it's almost, how do you protect the professor from the students, right? So how is that academic instruction going to be delivered, and how are you going to go about it? Are you going to classrooms, you're going to block off the first row? Are you going to use plexiglass? What are the things you're going to do? And I'll just offer an example that we're looking at is to develop a few prototypes of classrooms so that everybody can see them and kind of gain improvement. And we use those as standards as we move across campus. So now, you know, it's the end of May, and August sounds like a long time off, but it's really, you know, just over 2 months. So once decisions are made on classrooms, the facilities team is going to have a whole lot of tasks to do to implement those things. And one of the tasks will be, you know, how do you modify your classrooms? How do you mark off seats? How do you identify where people can and can't sit to get those social distance? And as a facilities guy, I'm thinking, hey, that's a piece of cake. You know, we got a roll of caution tape in the truck. Just go grab it and we'll take care of that problem. But then you realize the communication department is involved, and they're going to want to make sure that process is branded, making sure that it follows the standards for the university to present a professional image. And so you take that and you go through all the signage issues that you're going to have to look at for entrances and exits, and you know, some stairs being up, some stairs being down, you know, those types of things. So there's just going to be a lot of tasks that the facilities staff will be doing and taking the lead on. One other topic that I'll throw out there as we start to reopen things is innovation districts and how the universities deal with private tenants. You know, there's a difference where some private tenants that are in university-owned buildings, and then there's university staff that are in private buildings, and all of this is residing on your campus. So whose procedures do you follow? You following the private tenants, the private management company that owns the building, or you're following university's perspective? And I'll say what NC State has focused on thus far is university employees, and that's the terms that you'll see. And that's mainly, if you go back to your understanding of OSHA regulations, OSHA defines the employer's responsibility in the general duty clause, where the employer will provide a workplace free of recognized hazards. So that's the approach we've taken, is that what we're doing for our employees, and then communicating that to our partners who may be contractors or people that are in private business but on our campus, presenting them what we're doing. So anyway, that's a little bit of what we're doing. I'll share a couple of other specifics here real quick. So for the research operation, as we're starting right now in this limited reopening, we're using a number of 35% efficiency in our labs. So that's been translated to say 35% while meeting the 6-foot social distancing requirement. So if everybody's probably done, you know, pi r squared to figure out what kind of area is required at 6 feet. So it's a little more than 100 feet, and then you use 35% efficiency, you're over 300 square foot per person in a research lab. So now you start looking at a 500 square foot lab, and if you use those rules, you can only put one person in that lab. So those are kind of some of the things we're grappling with as we begin to reopen and meet these challenging times and requirements. Joel had a good point in looking at your specific facilities, and for a campus with several hundred buildings, the approach we're doing is trying to put some quick way to do that. So we started a process of looking at the building systems and the range of quality, which, you know, its age and its condition, and looking at kind of a high, medium, low, where high is it's brand new or it's been recently renovated and it meets new codes, down to a low system that's, you know, window units, no, you know, limited outside air, you know, those types of things that wouldn't come anywhere close to today's codes. And then using that as a guide to deal with our occupancy and how many people that we think we can put in those when we're reopening. So hopefully that covers a few things, and I think with that, I'll thank you again for the opportunity to speak, and turn it back over to Lander and look forward to the questions.
That's excellent, Alan. We really, really appreciate your comments. I got a number of things I wrote down regarding how you're focusing on outside air, recirculating air, that you're not being reactive to all the good ideas that you're getting, and that the whole changing of MERV 1314 filters is, you identified the problems associated with that, and that what you're trying to do is get systems back to where they operate as designed, and erring on the side of overventilation. I also appreciated your prioritization, red, yellow, green, and the decision making associated with that, and how you're communicating it. and recognizing that you, like everyone else, has concerns about outside gatherings, classroom density, how you're going to protect students from faculty from students, et cetera, because of the at-risk, high-risk categories. I liked your approach to these prototypes that you demonstrate that could be standardized. And then, of course, the whole branding of signage. We're going to do some work on another town hall around traversing the campus, the whole issues of movement that people make. So we'll be getting to those. We have a lot of questions. One of the first ones, Alan, I'm going to find out if you can give us the checklist that you mentioned. It would be really great if you could provide that, and we would send that out to folks. Is that okay?
Yes, that's fine.
Okay, wonderful. Okay, so now I'm going to go to Taft first, and then I'm going to hit the other area of HVAC and Taft. We got a lot of questions about what brands or products that you're actually using in terms of your disinfectants and such. Maybe you could, because I have so many questions about the product you mentioned on 2-minute kill time, 30-second kill time, disinfectants, things like this. So maybe you could give us a list of the products you're using. Would you be willing to do that, Taft?
You mean right now,
No,
orally, or send one in?
Yeah,
Okay.
we could. Yeah, if you could provide that, I think we could answer a huge number of questions just by doing that. Okay.
Certainly.
Okay. Good. All right. So I do have this question came up and has continued to come up over paper towels versus air dryers in bathrooms. Taft or Alan, can you give me your view of this? Whether you should be going with paper towels versus air dryers, and why you made that decision? Taft?
Well, we have looked at it numerous occasions. This COVID situation has brought it to the surface again, and we haven't made a decision. Before, the limiting factors was energy conservation and the green approach, and now I think now we're erring toward more on the safety side, as Alan said about, or both of the other candidates said about, they're kind of holding back on the conservation of electricity versus the health of the indoor air quality of the building. So we're looking at that again, but for now we're looking at the practicality of when you go into a restroom, how long are they going to be in that restroom? And are they going to be willing to go in if they have to wait on other people to dry their hands with a hand dryer? And what is the economic or the funding requirement for outfitting your buildings in a short period of time with hand dryers? And what's the availability of the hand dryers? So I think you have to do your research first to see if your plan is feasible to go down that road. Right now we have something in place. Maybe in the long run we'll be able to make those kinds of changes if the research supports it. But right now, I think the quickest way we can get them in and out, then they will be more inclined to wash their hands, as we know that's the most effective way of cleaning our hands, even better than a sanitizer. But so right now we haven't really seriously considered going to that in the short run.
Okay, so you're going to stick with the paper towels.
Yeah, Lander, I would just say that's where we're at right now. To make a big change in the next month or two to start adding hand dryers when we're not sure like you said, we're not sure what the best practice is yet. There was a lot of technical articles as to which was better, but what we're right now focused on is the basics to make sure we've got a way to keep the soap dispensers filled with more classes and people in there. We've got enough places where people can wash their hands. Those are the basics that we feel is our responsibility, and that's where we're focusing time and effort.
Got it. That's really helpful. Okay. And so I will identify that the University of Nebraska-Lincoln has built sanitizer stations and an approach to purchasing the product and with an 80% alcohol base, and making their own product. And it's really interesting. So we'll make sure we get that posted and you can see what they did. Someone asked about foreseeing a federal mandate on hand sanitizer stations. We don't see that. We've had few federal mandates, so don't think that that will happen. And so Taft, in addition to the checklist that for reopening, could you also provide your approaches to, maybe afterwards, to your cleaning program, like what your scheduled frequencies are in classrooms versus the period changes in common areas? I think you probably have a nice write-up on that, and I think folks would love to have that, and that would answer a ton of questions that people were asking about cleaning frequencies and such. Would you be willing to do that?
Yes.
Absolutely. Okay, great. Excellent. And then the last question in this arena is really about electrostatic sprayers. Do you have a clear understanding of how to clean surfaces prior to using the sprayers? Or are you using the antimicrobial foggers and electrostatic sprayers that would actually increase clean time because you didn't have to do a clean the surfaces first? Is that what you're seeing?
I have looked at that too, but I think what I came to a conclusion, but it all depends on the timing and what direction leadership decides to go. We'll have to react to that. But we're continuing with our early morning detailed disinfection, and we're also adding day portering, or trying to add day portering to overlap and to extend into the day for additional rounds of high touch surfaces disinfection with cleaners or disinfectants that have short kill times, so that they can go in and they can get these high touch areas and get out and not have to worry about a surface being wet for 5-10 minutes or whatever. And so we are trying to do at least 2 additional restroom cleanings in each building, plus 3 rounds of high touch surface disinfection on the common area spaces.
Excellent. That's really perfect. That's exactly what I think folks were looking for. And we will get the products from Taft that he's using for these, because I think that's going to help people a lot. This really does make a huge difference. So I want to go to now to Joel and Alan on some of the things that you were talking about. So should elevator fans be a constant on to possibly create negative airspace? Joel, what is your recommendation on that?
Elevator fans tend to just move the air around. I'm not sure the science is out on their effectiveness at improving the air quality in the space. I think they would just create some suction when the doors open and get some hallway air coming in. So if the hallway air is good, then all right. But if you're not confident that the hallway air is any good, then I'm not sure that operating the fan. This would have to be a case-by-case basis. I'd have to look at it.
Okay, very good. And I got an interesting one on water coolers. It sounds like folks are they're asking questions about, should we take out water coolers, remove them entirely, and go to water bottle filler stations? Do we take all of that out? Maybe Joel and Alan, you could talk about what you think.
Well, I can tell you that here in Canada anyway, that the tendency is to get rid of all the water fountains and go to water bottle fillers stations. Mm-hmm. In fact, a lot of campuses, you can't even buy bottled water anymore. So water bottle filler stations are the way to go. And now in this COVID thing, I don't think you'll find too many people willing to put their faces close to where other people's faces were in a fountain. So I think naturally people will just avoid using the fountains just because they're questionable at best. So I'm not sure that people will want to do that. Okay,
very good.
Hey,
Alan,
Joel,
same thing?
Yeah, I'll just add to the water coolers. Over the years, we've got the bottle fillers that have made their way at the large classrooms, the student centers, the gyms, those kinds of things. So and that's what'll be used. and agree with Joel. People are going to be much more reluctant to put their face down to a cooler, but right now we don't have any plans to disable or take them out right now. And then back on the previous question on elevators, I just thought I'd relay, one of the good ideas that I was talking about we're getting from everywhere. One idea that we got from a department head was that we should reprogram all of our elevators so that the doors stay open when they're waiting for a call. And the reason was, well, if someone was in an elevator and sneezed, there could be virus on the door, so it'd be better if it was open. I don't know how to debate. I don't know how to have that discussion. So what we decided was that we would get the elevators back running as designed, which includes making the fans operational. So we're turning all of our elevator exhaust fans on so that they are operational.
Excellent. Okay, that's really good. That's going to help folks. So could the two of you talk about targeted humidity levels? Because you've talked a lot about this. People are now asking questions about these humidity levels. One said, what's the targeted humidity level that's recommended? Humidity percentage on BAS to room. Was it higher or lower to avoid infection rate? I think, Joel, you had mentioned that, so we might want to get that stated again. And same thing, Alan, about these, where you guys are going with humidity levels.
Yeah, sure. I can talk to this. Basically, the way that the current version of ASHRAE 55 is written is that it recommends a minimum of 40% relative humidity. 40% is hard to achieve, especially in places like Canada where I live. So realistically, we shoot more for 30%, but there is no hard, fast required minimum with regards to 55. But what we found out is that there's some research at the Harvard Medical School, and what they've discovered is that 40%, if we can maintain the relative humidity in the space between 40 and 60%, then the spread of the virus is minimized. There's lower infectivity, and in large part because humans would then have wetter mucus. I apologize if you're having lunch when I say that, but then that allows them to fight viruses better. So it's a combination of effect, but clearly keeping the spaces between 40 and 60% relative humidity is the way to go.
Okay, good. Alan, you want to add to that? Yeah, please.
I'll just add to it. Great question and great answer, Joel. And then so if you're in the South, you're at the other end of the spectrum, right? You're trying to keep it below 60% to keep mold from growing. So when you start talking about over-ventilating buildings to bring in more fresh air and you don't have the capabilities to dehumidify, your relative humidity goes up, and then you've got mold issues. So how do you trade off the risk between, creating mold in a building versus trying to deal with the COVID? So again, we're trying to get buildings to function the way they were designed and hopefully hit into that sweet spot.
That's good. And it is a balancing act. Somebody had asked about condensate and mold growth, et cetera. And so you're really homing in on that. Joel, did you have another comment?
Yeah, I was just going to say that, in a lot of the northern spaces, a lot of the northern buildings, if you maintain 40%, then you start getting lots of sweating on your windows. So the mold issue can occur in cold climates as well as it can in warmer climates. So it's something you need to watch, and it'll be a battle of compromises. You're going to try to stay between 40 and 60%, but you also have to react as Alan mentioned, you also have to react to what the building can actually handle and do.
Got it. Okay, let's do a couple more on these because the question is about what's the recommendation on the minimum outdoor air intake? Minimum outdoor air intake.
Well, that's a fairly complicated process with regards to how to determine how many CFM of outside air is required per space. There's a whole standard written to this effect. In fact, most jurisdictions have to follow what ASHRAE calls the ventilation rate procedure, which will dictate number of CFM per person, number of CFM per square foot. And then there's a whole bunch of other calculations with regards to ventilation effectiveness, how well the air actually makes it to the occupant spaces. So this is not an easy question to answer. This requires complex calculations, because the more densified the spaces are with occupants, then then the more outside air you would require per square foot. So it's a very difficult question to answer, one that is very prescriptively described in Standard 62. So there's not a lot of wiggle room in what the minimum is. The question that we have now is really, are we recommending to go above what the minimum requirement is? In a lot of cases, I think the consensus is during this pandemic, it makes an awful lot of sense to go above what the minimum calculations would be from 62.1.
Got it. Okay, that's excellent.
Hey, Lander, I'd offer one thing. Yeah, I'll just offer one thing. Great answer, Joel, to try to figure it out. For our newer buildings, we've disabled the demand control ventilation sequence to, like with carbon monoxide monitoring to control the fresh air ventilation. What that does is reduces fresh air ventilation. So we've disabled that. So I think at least on the newer buildings, by having, fresh air, not trying to do energy conservation, and some reduced occupancy in classrooms, by default is you're going to get more fresh air into those spaces.
Got it. Does it increased airflow promote dispersion? That's a question that they had. Ellen, you want to grab that? Hard one.
Yeah, I have no idea. I did read the Wuhan. There was an article flying around all on social media about the Wuhan restaurant where everybody got contaminated. And when you dive into the details, it was a fan coil unit with no outside air. And it was just spinning the air around in a little bitty restaurant, and that's how people got sick. So
okay.
Cramming a lot of people into small spaces, like Joel said, with inadequate space, you may want to look at alternate plans for that.
Okay, very good. That's excellent. And so I want to ask a question of Taft, if you could home in on this. Someone asked about, is there a different emphasis you're taking on soft versus hard floor cleaning, given flooring, according to CDC, is classified as sort of low touch, low contact surface, and in terms of carrying. So are you emphasizing different cleaning with respect to soft or hard floor spaces?
Not at present. I have been looking at it, but I haven't seen any of these data that supports that is a major issue right now with all the other stuff that we have going on, ways of transmitting it. But I have been researching wax or finishes that are supposed to give residual kill to viruses like coronavirus, different coatings in our equipment that put down the chemical and suck up the chemical that won't germinate the microorganisms inside the cleaning tanks and things like that. And coatings, even coatings for HVAC systems that have supposedly residual 90 to 120 day kill claim on viruses and killing of mold and mildew. So I've been looking at a lot of that kind of technology, but and hope and end up channeling to our partners.
Okay, good. And so that takes me right to a different question, but related, and that's the question was, why deep clean before you go back to work and reopen unoccupied spaces? If the space has been unoccupied and you've cleaned them, do you need to go in and do another deep clean before folks come back to work and you reopen, if those spaces have been unoccupied for a period of time? Taft and maybe Ellen?
Great question. I've dealt with that, and my answer would be no. If those spaces have not been occupied, there is no reason to go in and do a deep cleaning for the sake of doing a deep cleaning. However, the caveat being, if the spaces have been sitting dormant for a couple months, they're going to have dust accumulation and things of that nature. So we really didn't want people to come back to a dirty office to think that we hadn't been doing anything. But so we go in and not necessarily wipe every rock and nook and cranny, but we go in and we dust and we do a general cleaning, and then follow up with the high touch surface disinfection.
And Lander,
go ahead.
I'll just add one quick comment. Confidence, it goes a long way. If you hear what happens if Walmart or anything like that has an incident, some processing facility, one of the first things they do is do a deep cleaning. So right? You don't want to send cleaners in and risk them, so you wait the prerequisite time to make sure that they're safe. Then they put the PPE in and go do the deep cleaning. It generates confidence that that the place is clean.
That's perfect. That's absolutely right. Taft, have you have any experience in disinfecting upholstered furniture? It's an interesting
that's a good question. I have. I wouldn't say that there's any technology other than probably UV light, but even then, this question about how much of disinfecting you're doing, but still the term is sanitizing. And one of the products I'll send out on the list has is supposed to be effective against sanitizing cloth and curtains and chairs, soft covered chairs, and that's the Clorox product. And it's safe.
Excellent. That's really going to be great, because I know people I really wanted to have the products, and that's going to help them understand what you're doing in terms of each and every one of these surfaces that this is making. I did want to, Joel and Alan, I'm going to go back to you again, and this is on ASHRAE's MERV 13 or 14 air filters recommendation. But the person said, but medical experts at their state do not, that they don't need to do this. Can either one of you chime in on that? You know, we've got this sort of debate between ASHRAE's air filters and approach and versus the medical experts, and clearly you're doing something different with that, Alan, and there's a recommendation. Could the two of you tackle that, and then we'll go to close from there?
Yeah, I can tackle it quickly. You know, there is some debate whether or not MERV 13 or 14 filters are effective against aerosolized viruses. But what it can do, though, is that we know that dust is also an enemy. It triggers coughing and triggers sneezing. So you want to maintain cleaner air. So it'd be very hard to make an argument against having cleaner air in general, and how that would not also help with the spread of viruses.
Good, excellent. Alan?
Yeah, I would just add, completely concur with Joel, and then the personal responsibility aspect of this. If you're sick, don't come to campus into one of our classrooms. That's got to be the point, because we can't convert these buildings into clean rooms with HEPA filters or some kind of hospital isolation space. So if you're sick, stay home.
Yeah, and it really makes the case for why the face coverings, because you're actually protecting others from you, and that becomes super important. So let's go to close. We've got a few minutes here. I was going to do a polling question on one polling question, and let's see if we could go ahead and do that. Do you want to go to that? Yes, here we are. Are you having difficulty acquiring PPE supplies and equipment? And we're asking that because we're trying to find out from others if we can get you know, acquisition of these items. So we're trying to find out whether broadly folks are having difficulty, because we know I'm hearing this constantly. So I want to see what the uptake of this question is. So are you having difficulty acquiring PPE supplies and equipment? And Billy, I think we'll close. And wow, okay, you are, and I've been confirmed. Yes, 78% are having trouble. So we'll see what we can do with suppliers. E&I is a really good one on the institutional side. We'll see what we can find out there and get onto the website. So I want to thank our panel and conclude with just a quick reminder that we have a survey tool that's open for uploading your documents for your scenario plans, space type reconfigurations, departmental policies, protocols, and practices. You may certainly just send them to me directly at lander@appa.org. I have no problem you doing that if you're finding it difficult to respond. We have a slide and a standing call for images on COVID-19 engagement. You'll see them on our website right now. A slide on available resources. We will continue, we'll shoot those all out to you as slides. And to save the date for next week's topic, it's going to be really interesting. So on Got Questions, Ask the Community. So we're going to have a lot of different folks available on the call, and we're going to have an open mic opportunity to share facilities needs and challenges with colleagues. The following week on June 12, we'll be diving back into de-densifying space. And then a news flash here for all members. Mark your calendar for Tuesday, June 9 at 1 p.m. That's June 9, 1 p.m. All members. The internationally renowned Stephen M.R. Covey will offer a special 75-minute presentation session for APPA paid members only on leadership and trust. More information to follow this coming Monday. So, is it just me, or does the pandemic feel a bit like the movie Groundhog Day, where the protagonist Bill Murray is stuck in a loop, living the same day over and over and over, time becoming meaningless? Supposedly a comedy at the time, it's actually a bit of a horror film. And the central torment is uncertainty. When, oh, when will it all be over? Well, remember that all this uncertainty isn't all in your head. There really is a lot we don't know about the virus, the crisis it has created, what decisions will be made, and how this will all shake out. There is no playbook. Also remember, this virus is so slow moving that it is flattening time. And yet the pace is frenetic, all consuming. How does one find calm amidst the grim cycle of coronavirus anxiety? I suggest you stop, take stock of each present moment. They really are precious moments and all too fleeting. Yes, stop and savor those present moments and celebrate life. Thank you so much. Have a great weekend, and we'll see you next Friday.